in a United States where racism no longer exists? Can you imagine racism being something that we look at in a museum like an ancient artifact or only read about in history books instead of being something that we see happening every single day?
I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to The Resistance. I've been trying for a while now to figure out how to talk about something that's been on my mind, and recent events, I think, finally pushed it up. What I want to say is that racism is a white people problem.
This is a very racist society. I mean, it's pretty shocking what has happened in the last roughly 30 years with regard to African Americans. Actually, is very similar to what Baptist describes in the late 19th century. Remember?
Every system in America tells a story, and racism is the author behind too many chapters. From economic inequality to political divisions, the fingerprints of racism are everywhere. This isn't just a story about the past, it's a story about how centuries of discrimination continue to shape this country that we live in right now. Welcome to another Jamaica Vibes Entertainment TV video. And in this video, we're going to explore racism and what it did to America. Thank you for joining us. And without further ado, let's hop into the video. And make sure that you subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. And after the video, please leave a comment in the comment section.
I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to The Resistance. I've been trying for a while now to figure out how to talk about something that's been on my mind, and recent events, I think, finally pushed it up. What I want to say is that racism is a white people problem. A white people problem that others are forced to live with. As a white man, I've never had to be afraid of being pulled over by the cops. As a white father, I've never had to have that special talk with my kids about not looking wrong or saying the wrong thing to a cop for fear that they wouldn't come home again. I've never had to worry about being turned down for a mortgage because of the color of my skin or where to go jogging. Never had to worry that I could be scooped up by ICE just for looking like I might belong to the wrong group, even though I was born here. I've never committed the misdemeanor crime of selling cigarettes. But if I did, it wouldn't be a capital offense. These are things that people of color have to deal with every stinking day. These are things that white people allow, that white people cause. I think I'm finally ready to talk about it now because of the state that our country's in, the permission that Donald Trump has given for racist behavior, and the hope I recently felt when I saw the latest poll numbers. For reasons that never made sense to me, Donald Trump has gained support in nearly every demographic when he won his last election, including non-white communities. But now, recent polling suggests that just about everybody is finally seeing him for what he is. They're seeing his racism, and the racism emanating from this administration like stink from a skunk. And they're saying it's not okay. He's lost everything that he gained, and then some, among all these groups. Well, every group except one. That one group is white, non-college educated men, the last stronghold of Trump's race-based politics. Polling indicates that a majority of this group is still standing solidly behind Trump and his policies. Unfortunately for them, they're not going to be any better off under Trump's policies than anybody else. Maybe one day they'll realize that their racism isn't worth what they're losing. And maybe the rest of us will realize something too, that racism is a white people problem, and it's up to white people to solve it. It's up to white people to call it out among their coworkers, their friends, and their family. It's up to white people to be the loudest and proclaim that racism is no longer acceptable in American institutions. It's up to white people to make sure that we're not voting for the racists. Thanks for listening. Good day.
Now, when it comes to racism, we can see that you got many people that don't really want to talk about this subject. You know, people may want to ignore it, don't want to acknowledge it, or feel if they speak about it, they might be opening old wounds. But if racism is a thing and it's a part of this country, then we do have to speak about it, because it's not something that we do not know that it doesn't exist. It exists. So I can see why many people, you know what I'm saying, even if we got black people, white people, some people just don't want to talk about it. Some people want to act like the past is the past and you shouldn't rehash it or bring it up. You know what I'm saying? But that's their opinion, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But my thing is, if the past is our history, then why should we be silent about it? And that's all I'm saying. Now let's check out this next clipping.
If you've ever said any of these three phrases before, I want you to listen to this video. The first one is all lives matter. The second one is I don't see color. And the third one is stop talking about racism or it's never going to go away. Okay, so let's talk about why all lives matter is a problem. Hopefully this time you will be willing to listen. All lives is a problem because when we're specifically talking about Black lives and how Black people are being oppressed to this day, how Black people are suffering, it is not appropriate to say, well, what about everybody else? What about white people? White people are not oppressed. So let me give an example that maybe you can understand on why this is not fair. Let's say your loved one has stage 4 breast cancer. Let's say you go on one of those walks for making strides against breast cancer, and you have people there that are holding up signs that say, all illnesses matter. Then you have people that are actually getting mad at you because you're fighting for a cure for something that could take the life of your loved one. And they're like, well, what about all the other illnesses? That would be pretty messed up, right? And then if you say, I don't see color. If you don't see color, you don't see a person for who they are. You don't see their culture, which means that you see it as everybody's culture. So you go ahead and make it your own. It means you don't see racism. You don't see microaggressions. You don't see the suffering of the person of color. Oh, we're all the same, so you're not suffering, you're totally fine. And then when they talk about a racist thing that they just experienced that you were there for, you are like, what are you talking about? I didn't notice anything. In order to see what somebody else is experiencing, you need to have empathy. You need to be able to put yourself in their shoes, skin color and all. White people made up the concept of race, and white people created racism. And racism hasn't just disappeared because in your little white privileged world, you don't notice it when it happens, or you refuse to acknowledge it. And then those that say, stop talking about racism and it'll just go away. It's not going anywhere. Racism is well and alive. And again, your white privilege prevents you from seeing that. Your white experience. If you were born a Black person or a person of color, your experience would be entirely different. To deny seeing racist white people, to deny that it exists after living your entire life here on Earth, you've been living in a bubble, a privileged bubble. The only way to drive change is to talk about things. Again, I will give you a cancer reference. Let's say you got diagnosed with cancer. Oh, it's okay, if we don't talk about it, it will just go away. Just ignore it. I can't believe people are still talking about it. Don't they realize the reason they still have cancer is because they're talking about it? Wake up.
In a United States where racism no longer exists? Can you imagine racism being something that we look at in a museum like an ancient artifact or only read about in history books instead of being something that we see happening every single day? I know it might seem crazy to think about right now, but almost 20 years ago, many people thought that that day had arrived. When Obama was elected president in 2008, many people said that America had finally entered a post-racial age. They argued that now that the U.S. had elected a Black president, race didn't matter as much as it used to, and racism was about to be defeated once and for all. However, these optimistic predictions didn't last long. As soon as Obama took the oath of office, hate crimes started to rise, and there was an explosion of far-right hate groups.
This is a very racist society. I mean, it's pretty shocking. What has happened in the last roughly 30 years with regard to African Americans actually is very similar to what Baptist describes in the late 19th century. Remember what happened. The constitutional amendments during and after the Civil War were supposed to free African American slaves. It did something for about 10 years. Then there was a North-South Compact, which essentially granted the former slave-owning states the right to do whatever they wanted. And what they did was criminalize black life in all kinds of ways. That created a kind of a slave force. In fact, one of the most interesting books on it, Douglas Blackman's, is called Worse Than Slavery or something like that. It threw mostly black males, but also women, into jail, where they become a perfect labor force, much better than slaves. If you're a slave owner, you have to keep your capital alive. If the state does it for you, it's terrific. No strikes, no disobedience, perfect labor force. A lot of the American Industrial Revolution in the late 19th, early 20th century is based on that. Actually, it pretty much lasted until the Second World War, when there was a need for what's called free labor in the war industry. After that come about two decades in which African Americans had a kind of a shot at entering the society. A black worker get a job in an auto plant. The unions were still functioning, maybe buy a small house, send his kid to college or something. By the 1970s or 80s, it's going back to criminalization of black life. It's called the drug war, which is a racist war. Ronald Reagan was an extreme racist, didn't hide it. And the whole drug war, so-called, is designed from policing up to eventual release from prison to make it impossible for the black male community and more women and more Hispanics to be part of the society. In fact, if you look at American history, the first slaves came in 1619, half a millennium. There have been about 3 or 4 decades in which African Americans had a limited degree of freedom. Not entirely, but at least some. Now, of course, it's for black elites, there's some privileges, but I'm talking about the mass of the population, which has been recriminalized and incidentally also turned into a slave labor force. There's prison labor, for example. Well, this is American history. To break out of that is no small trick. In fact, if you take a look at the election, say the last election, in many ways it's a civil war of the red states of the Confederacy. It extends a little beyond, but that's pretty much what it is. And of course, this is a real battle. These two founding crimes, slavery and extermination of the indigenous population, they're very much with us. Take a look at Indian reservations today. It's not a pretty sight.
The thing also about racism is that it affects everybody. It affects everybody in many different ways and form. But it affects everybody. It affects how one set of people treat another set of people. And it affects the people who are getting treated in a negative way. And it's not just short term, it's a long term thing. Because if you don't like somebody just because of the color of their skin, then something is definitely wrong. Because when you look at it, we are all human beings. We are all human beings on this planet Earth. And we have different shades of color. You know what I'm saying? But we're all human beings. So just by not liking somebody just because they color, you hate them for that very reason, is very disgusting. But if we can't talk about it, then how are we going to have some understanding or come to some type of closure and saying, this is real, it do exist, and how we can get beyond it. But by getting beyond it and moving on, we got to acknowledge it. You can't sweep it under the rug and act like it didn't exist. You cannot want to be silent and not talk about it like it didn't happen. So if we know how to communicate, then we could get past all of this. If there's a problem, there's a solution. But we have to find a solution. And the solution is what is needed. So if you have enjoyed this video, please give this video a thumbs up. And like I say, if you find this video interesting, then you could share it with your friends and family. And also leave a comment in the comment section and let Jamaica Vibes Entertainment TV know that this was a very interesting video and you appreciate it. And with that said, my people, peace and blessings, and we check you out in the next video.